everybody, this is Erica, the technology nerd who likes to film stuff, and I've got the Galaxy S4 Active and beside it the Galaxy S4. Now I want to be real with you all today. I want to tell you some truths here. I am really not liking the Galaxy S4 Active, kind of at all. When it comes down to the Galaxy S4 and the Galaxy S4 Active, I am going to choose the Galaxy S4 every single time. And there's a couple things that I really want to talk about with this phone, so hopefully you can make the right decision between both of these two. Now today I'm not going to be doing a full review of the Galaxy S4 Active because I covered the Galaxy S4 in a confusing amount of depth over 4 different videos. So if you want to know all about the Galaxy S4 and what it's all about, just go check out my video series. It's actually in a playlist now, so you can watch every single one if you'd like. I talk about everything imaginable with this device. I really see the Galaxy S4 Active as a cheaper brother to the Galaxy S4. It's lacking a couple features of the Galaxy S4 and it tries to make up for it by being waterproof. And that is another very big thing that I want to talk about today, is how waterproof it really is or isn't. As for waterproof abilities, Samsung, as everybody knows by now, has called this to be IP67 certified. It's supposed to be dustproof and waterproof down to 3 meters or about 3 feet for about 30 minutes. All over the internet now I am seeing the horrors of what happens when you actually take this guy into the pool. This phone seems to be okay if you splash a little bit of water in it or if you dunk it for only a couple of minutes, but if you're actually in the swimming pool, you're swimming around, there's water pressure going around, and the water is swishing past over this and getting underneath the back cover, yes, sometimes it actually gets past the O-ring. This O-ring here that is underneath the back cover, the water sometimes gets past that and ends up shorting out the phone, or at least tripping the water or moisture indicator. Do you see this little notch here? On the back cover, there is this pin thing that is supposed to go into this notch, and that is supposed to be the fail-safe. When you snap this back cover on, you need to be, of course, very careful, making sure that all the little snaps are in place. But what you're supposed to do is you're supposed to click right down on here, and it's supposed to snap. That extra pin or snap is supposed to go into that notch, making it so that it is entirely sealed. Except for one thing, is that it doesn't ever snap. There is no snapping going on here. It's possible that when I put the back cover on, it's already pushing itself in there, but that's just not so promising. So let's get one thing straight. They call this IP67 certified, but let's call this a water-resistant phone instead of a waterproof phone. If there are those of you who have not had any trouble, great, good for you. I hope that nothing ever does happen. But in no way do I call this a waterproof phone. So even though this phone has the propensity to get water damage if you do anything else other than just dunking it or getting it a little bit wet, you don't have to worry that AT&T or Samsung are just going to leave you screwed without a phone. AT&T Press has released that if you do get water damage with the phone that they will replace it, although I had seen that they said one time. Now I was confused about that, so I went and called around, went and got actually talking to somebody inside of the warranty department who said that they were just told by AT&T that if there is water damage with the phone, just to replace it. So it is possible to get your phone replaced if it does short out or if there is any type of water damage or if the moisture indicator has been tripped in some way. Now the thing is that the lowly employees, kind of like the customer service employees, have no idea about this. I called in and a very rude gentleman, I was saying, it's a big problem with this phone that it actually gets wet like that and shorts out. And he's like, well, maybe in your own little world it's a problem, but I've never heard of that before, so I'm gonna have to transfer you. I'm like, yes, good. Transfer me to someone who's more knowledgeable and has more power. So if any AT&T employee tells you that they've never heard of that, make sure that you get transferred over to the warranty department because they know the real deal. And also, if your phone fails for doing nothing other than using it exactly as advertised, then it's kind of illegal for it not to be replaced. So don't worry about that. If somebody tells you, no, we haven't heard of that, which seems to really be the case right now, just keep trying. Ask to be sent to the warranty center, and I'm sure that you will find somebody eventually who knows what they're talking about. So yes, you can get this replaced. And if all else fails, I'm sure Samsung will replace it for you. So if you have the international version of this and it gets wet, I'm sure Samsung will help you out. But still, even with all of that, knowing that if it does get damaged, they will replace it X amount of times, most likely, there is still the issue that when you get this wet, when you dunk this phone all the way into the water and it sits submerged even for, I don't know, a couple of minutes, it ends up getting water inside of the headphone jack. And when water is inside of the headphone jack, it makes the headphone jack entirely freak out. It thinks that there are headphones plugged in all the time. So when it thinks that there are headphones plugged in all the time, you can't call out. You can make a phone call, but you can't hear anything. So that alone just makes this completely pointless if you want to use this in the water and actually use it as a phone. Fail, Samsung, fail! The thing is, it's not like you can just blow out the headphone jack and it's gonna start working within a couple of minutes. I mean, that's probably a possibility. But when I had gotten water stuck in this guy, because I had done all the water tests, it took like 5 hours for it to completely dry out. I was just blowing on this thing, trying to get the water out. I ended up taking like a Q-tip or something, sticking it in there, trying to get the headphone jack to think that there was nothing in it anymore. That was just ridiculous. Now, as far as this being a more rugged phone, I've been hearing some people mistakenly say pretty much all over the web that, hey, this is a ruggedized version of the Galaxy S4, and you can drop it and be all manly with it, and it doesn't need a case. Actually, no, that's really not true. I don't see that much differences in actual build quality in terms of how stable and tough this phone is. This guy has got Gorilla Glass 3, this one only has Gorilla Glass 2, and also the only thing that I'm seeing that's different is the fact that it's got this rubber here on the top and the bottom. Now that's for waterproofing, that's not for making it more rugged. Otherwise it's got slightly more of a bezel here, but still if it hits face down, the glass is going to crack. If it hits the ground, the plastic is probably going to ding, crack, or scratch, same as with the regular Galaxy S4. So when they say ruggedized, they mean it can stand up against the elements like being splashed with water or getting dust on it, but it is not drop-proof. Please don't make that misconception and do something stupid. Now, in terms of battery life, I feel that it is very similar to what I get on the regular Galaxy S4. When down to 5%, I'm almost getting 20 hours, and for screen time, it's almost hitting that 5-hour mark. So battery life is pretty darn comparable to what you're going to be getting with the regular Galaxy S4. I find that nice considering that this is an LCD screen instead of an AMOLED panel, which arguably AMOLED panels are supposed to use less power, but this one seems to be lasting just as long. So I am not bashing battery life, it is on par with the regular Galaxy S4. But one thing that they really stepped down on is the screen. Reviewers all over the place are saying, yeah, well, maybe it doesn't have the same contrast ratio, which means that basically the blacks are just not as black because it's an LCD screen compared to an AMOLED panel. But they're actually curiously saying that because it's not an AMOLED panel, the colors are more accurate, which just baffles my mind. That's just talk from people who have no idea about anything with displays. I would definitely say that with color, saturation, everything, this one is better. Yes, it has a wide gamut, which means it has the ability to display a lot of colors, but having a wide gamut is not a bad thing. The thing that's bad is when they start oversaturating things, and they're really not doing that with the Galaxy S4 like they did with the Galaxy S3 and some of the other AMOLED displays. But with this guy, Samsung is actually oversaturating quite a bit because it's an LCD screen and they want it to look more like the AMOLED display. So when they start oversaturating things, things just don't look correct. The colors don't look right. So no, I would not say that because this is an LCD screen that it's got more accurate colors than what's on this one. For one thing, this has a full sRGB gamut. It's actually wider than sRGB. When you have sRGB gamut for an LCD display, when it's got the full sRGB, it looks the most natural. This one isn't even meeting full sRGB all the way. It's lacking slightly, ever so slightly in the greens. But the worst thing of all with this panel is that it is just so blue. It looks terrible. It's ranging about 8,000K. When you have a display that's going above 7,500K to 8,000K, it just looks blue. The white point is so blue that nothing looks natural anymore. It just gives the whole screen a blue cast. So everything that I look at, all the whites, the greens, any color that I'm looking at just doesn't look right. That is not a problem with the regular Galaxy S4. Look how blue this is. This is not white whatsoever. I'm normally a very big fan of LCD displays because they don't have the tendency to burn in like AMOLED displays do. Yes, this has a really nice pixel density, it looks really nice and sharp, but the colors are just wrong, the color temperature is atrocious. And it's just overall a very big step down from what we have on the regular Galaxy S4. So all of those people who are saying that this has a really nice, natural looking display, they just don't know what they're talking about. So I honestly, at this point, recommend that you get the regular Galaxy S4 and you get something like a waterproof bag case, or even maybe one that's custom made for this phone, a waterproof case. Do that. I'm gonna say that this one's much, 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 much better. Also, another step down is the camera. This one is 13 megapixels and this one is 8 megapixels. Now, when talking about the cameras, I don't want to get into a huge amount of depth, but there are two really obvious things that I want to point out. The first thing is that the regular Galaxy S4 is capable of taking very punchy, saturated pictures. Now, some people like that and some people don't, but you can see that there is quite a difference. The other obvious thing to point out is that there is a huge difference between 8 megapixels and 13 megapixels. There's a lot of speculation between, megapixel race, we don't really need all that megapixels in there. But honestly, if you go from having a 13 megapixel camera and then you go back to looking at the 8 megapixel camera, you're pretty much just flabbergasted by how much detail is in the 13 megapixel picture. Looking at anything from leaves to grass blades to just grains of sand, you can see so much more detail with the regular Galaxy S4. So I really find it to be a huge step down and quite a shame that they're not including the new sensor inside of it. Now, as far as processors, it's got the exact same processors as the Galaxy S4 Snapdragon version. It's got the S600 clocked at 1.9 gigahertz, a very fast, speedy little phone, Adreno 320 GPU. But what I'm noticing with games, which is really odd, is that this one does stutter a little bit here and there, but I noticed that it was actually pausing during some games, stopping for a second, and then I had also noticed that when I was playing Need for Speed that it just didn't load. The screen was black. It sat there, I was listening to the sound and the music in the background, and the game was just sitting there. So it looks like there is some instability on the ROM that they released it on. There is no excuse for this because the regular Galaxy S4 had no such issues in the beginning. So Samsung, AT&T, whoever was responsible for that, fix it. It really does feel to me like the Galaxy S4 Active was an afterthought and that Samsung just kind of picked parts and put things in it and they didn't care. They really did not care about the overall quality of this phone. This one feels like the cheap Chinese knockoff and this feels like the actual real phone. So this has been more or less a rant video about the Galaxy S4 Active. If you have this phone and you love this phone, good for you. I'm glad that you really like it and that it works for you. But in comparison to what was already released on the market, this one honestly doesn't add up. It was a lot of marketing hype and it doesn't even hold up to that hype because it's not waterproof like they say it was supposed to be. Luckily you can get it replaced, but that doesn't make up for the fact that it's not so good. So thank you everybody for watching. This has been Erica, the technology nerd who likes to film stuff. Now please don't be offended if you've already gotten this phone and it works very well for you and you haven't had any issues. I'm just forewarning people out there who are trying to decide between this one or this one. I would say that the only leap up for this phone is if you like that it's a bit thicker, it's a bit heavier, it feels a bit more substantial, and if you also want to have hardware buttons because these are actually very nice. It's easier to press on capacitive buttons than it is the hardware buttons. And also, go for it if you happen to like the colors that they're offering. The color is not so shabby. It is a nice blue and I really like this. They're also offering it in an orangey color and a gray color. Although keep in mind that the Galaxy S4 comes in several different colors as well. The international version, at least I've seen that there's all kinds of very interesting colors for you to choose from. I always try to be as truthful and as honest with you as possible, and now I was, and now I'm going to go eat some tacos. And I'm going to send this back to AT&T.